The day my parents opened my wedding invitation, my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "We are not going to sit there and watch you ruin your life on a piece of trash with a history like that." And my mother, my own mother, leaned in next to him and added, "His mama was a drunk who dumped him at a bus station when he was 8 years old. What kind of worthless man does that make him? You are better than this garbage, Camille." Then they mailed my invitation back to me, with one word written across it. No. And they told my brother and my sister to stay home too. So on a Saturday afternoon in late March, I walked down the aisle of St. Bridget's Church completely alone. No father's arm to hold. No mother crying in the front row. Just me, a bouquet shaking in my hands, and 200 guests watching a bride with no family at all. And then, halfway down that aisle, the heavy oak door at the back of the church creaked open. A woman in a blue dress stepped inside. And the man my parents had called damaged goods, the man waiting for me at the altar, looked up, saw her, and dropped straight to his knees on the marble floor. My parents thought they knew exactly who they were rejecting. They were wrong. Dead wrong. And what walked through that door next didn't just blow their little boycott up in their faces. It turned my wedding into something that 30 million people would watch from their phones, and it made my parents the most hated people on the internet for a week straight. Stay with me, because you have not heard a story like this one. My name is Camille Brooks. I'm 28 years old, I work as an occupational therapist at a veterans hospital, and the man I married is the best human being I have ever known. If you've ever had your own family turn their backs on you over something that wasn't even your fault, if you've ever been made to feel like loving the wrong person made you a traitor, then I need you to do me one small favor before we go any further. Hit that like button. And tell me down in the comments, have you ever been rejected by your own blood on one of the most important days of your life? Tell me where you're watching from, too. I read all of them. Now let me take you back to where it started. To the week the RSVP cards came in the mail. Because that's when my family showed me, in their own handwriting, exactly who they were. The RSVP cards started showing up in the middle of February. Most of them came back with happy little check marks under, accepts with pleasure. My best friend Brooke, my maid of honor, sent hers back with champagne glasses drawn on it and "can't wait" written in big capital letters. Caleb's union brothers, the guys he'd run electrical work alongside for 10 years all over Boston, sent theirs back fast. Every single one of them checked yes. And then my family's cards arrived. I remember the exact day. It was a Tuesday, and I'd taken the afternoon off so Caleb and I could go through the responses together. We were sitting at his kitchen table, the cheap little table he bought when he first got his own apartment, with a spreadsheet open on my laptop. Green for yes, red for no, yellow for still waiting. I opened the first envelope. My mother's handwriting. Diane Brooks. Gerald Brooks. Some part of me still hoped I was wrong. Under declines with regret, she'd checked the box. No note. No explanation. Just that one check mark and her signature in that perfect cursive of hers. Second envelope. My brother Wesley and his wife. Also no. Third envelope. My sister Brianna. No. 3 red cells on my spreadsheet, sitting there in a whole field of green. My entire family, in one little block, blank. Caleb saw my face change. He said, "Babe?" And I couldn't even talk. I just turned the laptop around so he could see it. And he reached across that little table and took my hand, and he didn't say anything. He just held on while I stared at my mother's perfect handwriting spelling out our names and those boxes she'd checked with such certainty. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom. I should have let it go. I didn't. Hello? Camille, we got your invitation. That tight voice she uses when she's about to say something unreasonable but wants to sound reasonable doing it. And? We're not coming. We can't support this. Support what? My marriage? Then I heard a click. And my father's voice came on the line. with that hollow speakerphone sound. They'd planned this. A united front. They'd sat down together and rehearsed. "Don't act like you don't know what we're talking about," my mother said. "That man is trash, Camille. His mother was a drunk who dumped him at a bus station like he was a bag of garbage. What kind of worthless man comes from that? Trash. Garbage. Worthless. These are words my mother uses for things she throws out. Not for people. Caleb Donovan was born on Valentine's Day. Which sounds romantic until you hear about his childhood, because there was nothing romantic about it. His mother, Loretta, was 18 when she had him. Fresh out of high school, working a register at a convenience store, already drinking more than a person should. Caleb doesn't remember much before he was about 5. What he does remember comes in pieces. Moving all the time, 6 different apartments before he was 8 years old. His mother's boyfriends, men whose names he can't remember but whose voices he can. The smell of cigarettes and cheap beer. Mornings when he'd find her passed out on the couch and he'd make himself a bowl of cereal because he was hungry and she wouldn't wake up. He told me all of this on our 3rd date. We were at a diner. One of those 24-hour places with red vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been sitting on the burner since yesterday. It was 2 in the morning. We'd gone to a movie and then we just kept talking because neither of us wanted the night to end. He said, "My mom tried, you know. She had good weeks. She'd get clean for a stretch, make pancakes on Saturday mornings, chocolate chip. She'd braid my hair. I wore it long when I was little. We'd watch cartoons. She called me her little man." He smiled at that, but it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. And then she'd disappear for days. I'd go stay with my grandmother, Ruth. Then Mom would come back, swear it was different this time, take me home. And the whole thing would start over again. I asked him, how long did that go on? He said, until I was 8. And then he told me about the day. A Tuesday in late August. His mother took him to the Greyhound bus station in Worcester. She bought him a king-size Snickers bar. He remembers that detail like it was carved into him. She sat him down on the blue plastic seats at gate 6, a little after 2 in the afternoon. And she said, "Wait here. I'll be right back." And she walked toward the bathroom. So Caleb sat there, eating his candy bar, watching people come and go, watching buses pull in and pull out, listening to the announcements crackle over the old speaker. And after 41 minutes, he counted, he started to get scared. He went up to the clerk, a woman named Wanda with kind, tired eyes, and he asked her if she could check the bathroom. Maybe his mom was sick. Wanda found a note tucked into the pocket of his little jacket, written on a Dunkin' Donuts napkin, in his mother's handwriting. "I can't be the mom you need. Grandma will take care of you. I'm sorry." That was it. No goodbye. No real explanation. Just a napkin and a promise to be right back that she never meant to keep. His grandmother Ruth came and got him 3 hours later. She was 61 years old. She worked. The weeks between that phone call and the wedding were a strange kind of slow torture. You're planning the biggest day of your life, and the whole time you know half the people who are supposed to love you most won't be there. Every box you check off feels hollow. Book the church? Done. St. Bridget's, this beautiful old place in Boston with stained glass and wooden pews that smell like furniture polish and 100 years of prayers. Book the reception hall? Done. Caleb's union brothers got us their hall at cost, $850 instead of $3,000. Order the cake. Pick the dress. I cried in that dressing room when I found the dress. Not because it was beautiful. Because my mother wasn't standing there to see it. Every single decision came with an asterisk on it. Every deposit felt like an act of defiance. But the guest list was the part that hurt the most. We had 200 people confirmed. And the math of it was just brutal. My side of that church? 24 people. Brooke and my bridesmaids. A few college friends loyal enough to ignore my parents' little boycott. My cousin Maya, 16 years old, who flat out defied her own parents to come. My Aunt Gail, my mom's own sister, who called me crying to say she'd be there no matter what Diane said. A handful of co-workers. 24 people. Caleb sighed. 176. His union brothers and their whole families. Vince, the man who trained him. His best man, Danny. Friends from trade school. The kids from the youth center and their parents. 176 people, most of whom had never even met me, showing up because Caleb asked them to. You could already picture it. Bride's side, half empty. Groom's side, packed wall to wall. Our wedding planner, Paula, gently suggested we just take the reserved family signs off my side. Camille, she said, it might be easier if we just don't call attention to it. We were sitting in her office, looking at the seating chart. 3 seats in the front row of the bride's side, marked reserved, family in pretty script. I said, leave them. She looked at me with this soft pity in her eyes. Sweetheart, leave them, I said again. I want those seats there. Reserved. Just in case they change their minds. She said, in 15 years of doing this, I have never once seen a family come around this close to the date. I said, then I'll be the first. I knew I wouldn't be. But I could not bring myself to take those seats away. Some stupid, hopeful little part of me needed them sitting there empty, just so my parents would have the option. Even though I knew, deep down, they'd never take it. At my final dress fitting, the seamstress, a sharp, kind woman named Magda, had to take the dress in 2 whole inches at the waist. She had pins in her mouth and she said, "You losing weight, darling? You need to eat. A bride should glow, not fade." I'd lost 8 pounds in 6 weeks. Stress weight. I couldn't keep food down most days. The wedding was a little over 2 weeks out and I was hollowing out from the inside. But the night before the wedding, Caleb gave me a little velvet box. He laughed when he saw my face and said, "Don't panic. It's not another ring." Inside was a strand of pearls. Simple. Old. The kind that come with a history. He said, real quiet, they were Grandma Ruth's. She wore them to my high school graduation. To every important thing. I want you to wear them tomorrow. She would have loved you. She would have wanted to be there. I put them on. They sat cool against my collarbone, and they fit like they were made for me. And he said, "You're going to walk down that aisle tomorrow, and you're going to be the most." Her name was Loretta Donovan. 51 years old. Caleb's mother. The woman who left him at that bus station more than 23 years before. She lived in Providence, Rhode Island. About an hour and 20 minutes from Boston. And here's the thing my parents never bothered to learn, the thing that would have blown up their whole story if they'd cared to ask. Loretta had been sober for 23 years. 23 years of meetings. Thousands of them. 23 years of carrying a little sobriety coin in her pocket. 23 years of making amends and learning to live with what she'd done. She worked as an addiction counselor now, helping other people climb out of the exact hole she'd nearly died in. She was married to a kind, patient contractor named Frank. They never had kids. Loretta had been too afraid. Too afraid she'd repeat her own mistakes. Too afraid she'd pass on whatever brokenness made her leave her boy at a bus station. When Grandma Ruth died, Loretta saw the obituary online. That's how she found out Ruth was gone. And that's when she started looking for her son. It took her 3 weeks to find him. Caleb Donovan, electrician, Boston area. And then she did something she's not proud of. She made a fake account, gave it a stranger's name and a stock photo, and she followed her son from a distance. For years. She watched him live his life in little posts and photos. Watched him work. Watched him volunteer. Watched him fall in love with a woman named Camille. She saved every single photo, dozens of them, in a folder on her computer. The day he posted our engagement photo, me, my hand out, the ring catching the light, she stared at it for an hour. Her son was getting married. And she wasn't going to be there. That was the deal she figured she'd made with the universe a long time ago. You abandon your child, you lose the right to witness his life. But she kept watching anyway. The venue. The cake. The suits. All of it, from 50 miles away, invisible. And then one day she saw something in the comments under one of my posts. She noticed there wasn't a single comment from anybody with my last name. No family. She dug a little deeper, and she found a thread on one of Caleb's friends' pages. Somebody had written, "Can't believe her family's not coming. Their loss." And somebody else had written, "Bride's walking down the aisle solo? That's rough." And Loretta's chest just caved in. Because she understood, in that moment, exactly what was about to happen. A bride was going to walk down that aisle completely alone. The same way her little boy had sat completely alone on a blue plastic chair at gate 623 years before. Two different kinds of abandonment. The same exact wound. She called her therapist the next day. She said, "I want to go to the wedding." Her therapist said, "Loretta, he might not want you there. He might be angry. This could set your recovery back." And Loretta said, "I know. I know all of it. But I cannot let him stand there alone. Not again." She spent 12 therapy sessions getting ready for it. 12 hours of working through why she wanted to go, of accepting that showing up was not the same thing as being forgiven, of preparing herself to be thrown out of that church. She bought a plain blue dress, modest, nothing that would draw a single eye. Her plan was simple. Sit in the very back. Watch from a distance. Leave before the reception. Just be present, for one moment, for the boy she'd missed an entire lifetime of moments with. Her husband Frank tried to talk her out of it. He said, "What if he sees you?" She said, "Then he sees me." He said, "What if he tells you to leave?" She said, "Then I leave." I woke up at Brooke's apartment that morning with my stomach tied in knots. By a little after 9, the bridal suite was full. Brooke. My bridesmaids. My little cousin Maya, 16 and wide-eyed, filming everything on her phone. Mimosas, pastries, music playing soft. The happy, organized chaos of getting ready. And one thing missing. My mother. At every wedding I'd ever been to, the mother of the bride was right there, helping with the dress, fussing over the details, crying happy tears, taking 1,000 pictures. My mother was 50 miles away, probably having her coffee, probably not thinking about me at all. The makeup artist, Tara, sweet woman, had no idea what was going on, was blending my foundation, and she said, all chatty, "So where's your mom?" Usually moms are hovering at this point. The whole room went dead quiet. Brooke jumped in fast. She couldn't make it. Tara said, "That's a shame." Medical thing? And I just said, something like that. And she kept right on talking, oblivious, about all the other moms at all the other weddings she'd worked. Every word was a tiny little knife. When it was time for the dress, that's the part where the mother of the bride usually helps. 30-something little satin buttons down the back. Brooke did them. 8 minutes of careful fastening while I stood there staring at my own reflection. I looked beautiful. The dress was perfect. Ruth's pearls glowed against my skin. And I looked exactly like what I was, a bride with no family. Maya came up behind me, real soft, and said, "You look like a princess." And then she whispered, "I'm sorry about Aunt Diane. She's being really dumb." And I laughed. First real laugh I'd had all morning. I said, "Yeah, sweetheart. She really is." Then my phone buzzed. A text from my sister, Brianna. "I'm sorry I can't be there. Wesley and I wanted to come, but Mom and Dad said it would be disloyal. I hope you understand. You look beautiful. I saw Brooke's story. I wish things were different. I read it out loud. The room went quiet again. And one of my bridesmaids said what I was already thinking. She's an adult. She made a choice. She chose them. I said, and I chose Caleb. We both made our choices. Brooke asked if I wanted to write back. I said, no. What would I even say? The photographer arrived. Kind man named Eddie. He'd shot hundreds of weddings, and he knew exactly what was missing from this one. He took the standard shots: bride alone, bride with the girls, bride with the bouquet. And the shots he didn't take, the ones that just wouldn't exist? Bride with her mother. Bride with her father. The family photos. Those pages in my album were going to stay empty forever. In the car on the way to the church, Brooke held my hand the whole time. She said, real quiet, just to me, you don't have to do this. If it's too much, we can postpone. Caleb would understand. I turned to her and I said, I am not postponing. I'm marrying him today. With them, or without them. And she said, okay. Then let's go get you married. Up at the altar, Caleb was trying to remember how to breathe. He stood there in his charcoal gray suit, a suit he'd saved up for this one day. His best man, Danny, stood beside him. 3 groomsmen flanked them. Father O'Brien, 60-something with an Irish accent that made everything sound like a blessing, gave him an encouraging little nod. But Caleb's hands were shaking. He had a white-knuckle grip on the altar rail. Danny leaned in and whispered, "You good, brother?" And Caleb said, "She's about to walk down that aisle alone because of me." And Danny said, "Not because of you. Because of them." Big difference. And Caleb looked at those 3 empty seats in the front row, the "A Reserved Family" sign sitting there, so hopeful, so cruel. And he said, "Doesn't make it hurt any less." Then the organ started. The wedding march. And every guest in that church stood up and turned toward the back. Caleb couldn't see the doors yet, a pillar blocked his view. But he heard it. He heard 200 people draw in a breath all at once. The sound of a room seeing something it shouldn't have to see. A bride. Walking alone. And then I came around the pillar, and he saw me. Ivory lace. Ruth's pearls at my throat. My veil trailing behind me. A bouquet of white roses trembling in my hands. And nobody beside me. He was crying before I even took my first step. I'll tell you something I never told anybody until later. I counted my steps down that aisle. Every single one. Because counting was the only thing keeping me from breaking down. 1, 2, 3. Don't look at the empty seats. 4, 5. Look at Caleb. 6, 7. He's worth this. 8. The whole church was silent. People were crying. Vince had his hand pressed over his heart. Everybody in that room could feel it, the wrongness of it, and the bravery of it, both at the same time. And right around the halfway point, my composure finally cracked. Just for a second. One tear got loose and rolled down my cheek. And that's the exact moment it happened. Creak. The heavy oak door at the back of the church swung open. And every single head turned. All 200 guests. The bridesmaids. The groomsmen. Father O'Brien. Me. Everybody turned to see who was showing up late to a wedding. A woman stood in the doorway. Blue dress. Maybe early 50s. Her hands were shaking and there were already tears on her face. The afternoon sun was pouring in through the door behind her, so for a second she was just a silhouette in all that light. I didn't know her. I'd never seen her before in my life. I looked over at Caleb to see if he did. And every drop of blood had drained out of his face. He'd gone white as the altar cloth. His eyes were locked on that woman in the doorway. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And then his legs just gave out from under him. Not a faint. Not a stumble. A complete collapse. His knees hit that marble floor with a crack that echoed through the whole church and made people flinch. Danny lunged to catch him and missed. And Caleb knelt there, hands flat on the cold stone, staring at the woman like he was looking at a ghost. 8 full seconds of total silence. And then his voice, broken and shaking, picked up by the microphone at the altar so everyone could hear it, "Mom." The whole church gasped at once. I stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, still holding my bouquet, completely confused. And the woman in the doorway took one step forward and stopped. She said, "Caleb. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to disrupt anything. I just needed to see you." And Caleb, still on his knees, said the thing that broke every heart in that room. He said, "You left me. You left me at a bus station." And her face just crumpled. She said, "I know. I know I did." Father O'Brien stepped forward, trying to understand what on earth was happening. He said, "Gently, Caleb, lad. Do you know this woman? Is she family?" And Caleb nodded, and he could barely get the words out. He said, "She's my mother. She abandoned me when I was 8. If that church had been quiet before, now it was a vacuum. Nobody breathed. And I want you to know, 14 people were already recording on their phones. Pure instinct. They had no idea what they'd just captured. And in that moment, I made a decision. I walked backward, down the aisle. Away from Caleb. Toward the woman in the blue dress. In my wedding dress, with my veil and my bouquet, I walked right up to this stranger who'd just blown my ceremony apart. The ceremony picked back up, but everything was different now. The whole room was charged, heavy. Guests kept glancing back at the woman crying silently in the last pew. Father O'Brien opened his prayer book. "Dearly beloved," he began. But Caleb kept looking back, every few seconds. He couldn't help it. 23 years, and his mother was sitting in the back of his wedding. When we got to the vows, Father O'Brien said, "Caleb, do you take Camille to be your lawfully wedded wife?" And Caleb turned and looked at his mother again. And Father O'Brien said, "Gentle, Caleb?" And he snapped back, looked at me, and said, "Yes. I do. I absolutely do." I squeezed his hands and I whispered, "Stay with me. Right here. Just us." When it came time for the rings, his hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped mine. I whispered, "We're almost there." He said, "I'm sorry." I said, "Don't be. Just stay." Then came the vows we'd written ourselves. Caleb went first. He got through most of it, and then he added the line we'd planned weeks before. He said, "And I promise to be the family you deserve." And his voice broke completely on the word family. Because the weight of that word had just multiplied in front of 200 people. His family, the one that abandoned him, was sitting right there. And mine, the one that claimed to love me, was nowhere to be found. He couldn't finish. He just stood there crying, and Father O'Brien quietly handed him a handkerchief. I said, "Soft, that's enough. I heard you." Then it was my turn. And I threw out the script. I looked right at him, and loud enough that the woman in the back row could hear every word. I said, "Caleb. I don't care who shows up and who doesn't. I choose you. Every single day. No matter what." And in that back pew, his mother's shoulders shook with sobbing. Father O'Brien looked out at this strange, broken, beautiful ceremony, and he set his book down for a second, and he improvised. He said, "I have married more than 300 couples in this church. I have never once seen a bride walk down the aisle alone. And I have never seen a mother appear after all these years. But I will tell you what, I have also never seen love this clear in all my life. You two have already proven you can weather the storm. This is just making official what's already true. Then he raised his voice over the crowd. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, you may kiss your bride. And before he kissed me, Caleb pulled me close and whispered, "Thank you for not running." And I whispered back, "Never." And the whole church erupted. Cheering, whistling, 200 people on their feet. And as we walked back down that aisle as husband and wife, his arm wrapped tight and protective around me, we passed his mother's pew. And Caleb slowed for just a second and looked at her. And she stood and whispered, "Congratulations." And he didn't answer. He just kept walking, out into the sunlight, into our marriage, into whatever came next. The reception was a blur. The grand entrance. Our first dance, where Caleb held me close and whispered the whole song, "I'm sorry I'm not all here." And I said, "You're here enough. That's what matters." Danny's best man toast, where he raised his glass and said, "To Camille, brave enough to walk down that aisle alone, and smart enough to marry him anyway." His mother never came to the reception. She stayed in that empty church for half an hour after everyone left, crying in the back pew, and then she drove back to her hotel alone. But around 7:30, Caleb couldn't take it anymore. He found me and pulled me aside and said, "I need to go talk to her. Now. I can't dance and cut cake while she's out there. I need to know why." And I cupped his face and said, "Then go. I'll be right here when you get back." He walked the 3 blocks back to St. Bridget's and found his mother and Frank sitting on the church steps. She stood up when she saw him. And he said, "You're still here." And she said, "You told me not to leave." They stared at each other. Mother and son. 23 years of distance in between them. And Caleb said, "I don't even know what to say to you." And she said, "You don't have to say anything. I'll talk. You listen, or you leave. Your choice." So he sat down on the step. Not next to her. A few feet away. And he said, "Talk." And she told him everything. The addiction. The men. The failures. How his grandmother screamed at her after finding him at that bus station and told her she was never getting him back. How she went and got high after leaving him, and overdosed 3 days later, and woke up in a hospital, and got arrested, and went to court-ordered rehab. How she got sober a little over a year after she abandoned him. How she spent the years after that climbing back, custodian, then peer counselor, then a licensed addiction counselor. How she wanted to reach out 1,000 times but there was a restraining order, and the fear, and the shame. How she watched him from fake accounts for years, saving his photos, tracking his whole life from 50 miles away. How she saw he was getting married, and saw that my family wasn't coming, and recognized the parallel. "I saw her walking alone," she said, her voice shaking. "And I thought about you. 8 years old, alone at that bus station. And I could not let you stand there alone again." Caleb's jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. He said, "You don't get to fix this by showing up 23 years later." She said, "I know." He said, "Do you understand what it did to me? You left me a note on a napkin." She said, "I know." And he stood up, overwhelmed, and started to walk away. And then he stopped. And he turned back. And he asked her, "Were you going to leave after the ceremony?" She said, "I was planning to." And he said, "Don't." Her eyes went wide. "What?" He said, "Don't leave. I'm not ready to talk. But don't leave." And he walked back to the reception, back to me, back to our life. And his mother sat down on those steps and cried until Frank helped her to the car. And she kept whispering, "He said don't leave. He said don't leave." And Frank said, "That means maybe there's a chance." Here's the thing nobody at that wedding knew yet. While Caleb and I were cutting our cake, one of his union brothers, a guy named Trevor, uploaded a 47-second video to TikTok. The caption read, "Bride walks alone. Door opens. Groom collapses. His mom, who abandoned him 23 years ago, just showed up. 2 minutes later, 38 views. 5 minutes, 300. 10 minutes, almost 2,000. Trevor's wife looked at his phone and said, "Trevor, it's taking off." By midnight, 89,000 views. By the next morning, almost 4 million. And Trevor wasn't the only one. 13 other guests had filmed it too, different angles. A close-up of Caleb's face. A wide shot showing the empty seats on my side of the church. One that caught, "You left me at a bus station," crystal clear. And the whole thing exploded. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, every platform. Somebody posted the story to a big wedding forum and it shot to the top. A morning TV show emailed my public account asking us on. A magazine called. By the time Caleb and I surfaced from our little Cape Cod honeymoon 2 days later and turned our phones off airplane mode, the flood came in. 247 missed calls. Over 1,000 texts. And the video Trevor posted? 28 million views. I just stared at my phone and said, "Caleb. We're everywhere." And he showed me his. We were trending. There was a hashtag. And the comments were the part that made my hands shake. Because the internet had done the math my parents refused to do. The top comment, with hundreds of thousands of likes, said, "The bride's parents boycotted because his mom had problems." But his mom, the one who knows she messed up, showed up anyway. The perfect parent stayed home. Make it make sense. Another one, they judged him for being abandoned. Like he chose to be left at a bus station at 8 years old. These parents are the actual monsters. And another, imagine calling a man garbage and worthless because his mother was an addict, and then his mother shows up, sober, proving people can change, while you sit at home looking like the real trash. Articles were already going up. News outlets. Psychology blogs. 50 miles away, in my parents' comfortable suburban house, my father's phone buzzed early on a Saturday. A text from his neighbor and country club buddy, Phil. "Ray, isn't this Camille's wedding? It's all over Facebook." And a link. My father clicked it. Trevor's video. Now at 18 million views. He watched me walk alone. He watched the door open. He watched Caleb collapse. He heard him say, "Mom." And then he stumbled out of bed and woke up my mother and said, "You need to see this." So my parents sat there on the edge of their bed, in their comfortable house that they fought so hard to build, and they watched their daughter's wedding on a stranger's phone. They watched me walk down that aisle with nobody beside me. They watched those 3 empty seats, the ones I refused to take away. They watched the groom they called trash fall to his knees. And my mother whispered, "Oh my God. That's her. That's Camille. She's all alone." Then my mother scrolled down to the comments. And her face went white. She said, "Raymond, Gerald, they're talking about us." And they were. By name, by the thousands. The bride's parents boycotted because the groom's mom was an addict. The groom's mom showed up sober after 23 years. The bride's parents didn't show up after 28 years of being her parents. Who failed who? Somebody had found my brother's page. Somebody found my sister's. The comments poured onto them too. "Your sister walked alone and you weren't there? Shame on you. Family boycotts are abuse." My mother started crying. She said, "We need to call her." And my father, still scrolling, said, "And say what? Sorry we missed your viral wedding? This is going to hit all of us. Wesley's job. Your sister's reputation. The country club," and my mother said, "The country club? People are calling us monsters, and you're worried about the country club?" And my father looked at his wife, this woman he'd climbed out of a poor childhood with, the two of them clawing their way up to comfortable and then guarding it so viciously they'd throw away their own daughter to protect. My parents didn't call during the honeymoon. Giving us space, they claimed later. Really? Shame. My brother texted first. I saw the video. I should have been there. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. My sister texted. Mom and Dad are a mess. They know they messed up. Please call when you're ready. I didn't answer that either. A few days later, my mother called. I let it ring out. She called again the next day. And this time, I picked up. Camille, honey, it's Mom. I said, flat, I know. We saw what happened at your wedding. I said, you mean you saw the video? Since you weren't actually there. She flinched. I heard it. She said, we need to talk about that. And I said, do we? She said, we made a mistake. And I laughed, bitter, ugly. I said, a mistake is sending the wrong RSVP. You boycotted my wedding. You called the man I love trash. You called him worthless. You told Wesley and Brianna not to come. You sent my invitation back with one word. That wasn't a mistake. That was cruelty. My father came on. We thought we were protecting you, Camille. Stop, I said. He was abandoned as a child. That's not a character flaw. That's trauma he survived. You knew that, and you chose not to care. There was a long, painful silence. And then my mother, crying, real or performance, I couldn't tell, whispered, can we see you? To apologize properly? And I closed my eyes and I took a breath, and I told them exactly how it was going to work. I said, if you want back into my life, here are the terms. Family therapy, me, Caleb, and the both of you. You don't get a relationship with me that doesn't include my husband. You actually do the work on why you did this. And you don't get opinions on my marriage anymore. Ever. You gave that up. My mother said, that seems harsh. And I said, harsh is deciding your daughter's worth is tied to her husband's job title. You're getting off easy. My father said, we'll do whatever you want. I said, I'll text you a therapist's name. You book the appointment. If you don't show up, we are done. And they showed up. The therapist's name was Dr. Marsh. Sharp, warm, took no nonsense. My parents got there early, nervous. Caleb and I got there right on time. My mother started to stand up to hug me and I stepped back and said, let's save it for inside. My father stuck out his hand to Caleb. Caleb shook it. Firm. No small talk. Inside, Dr. Marsh laid out the rules. No interrupting. No defending. Just listening. Then she turned to me and said, this is your session. Where do you want to start? I'd prepared. I had an index card. I said, I sent you 68 invitations. You sent back 3. No. 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 And you didn't just decline, you told my brother and sister not to come. You made it clear that my husband was unacceptable to you. And the worst part wasn't even that you didn't come. It was knowing you chose your pride over me. My mother opened her mouth and Dr. Marsh held up a hand. No defending. Listen. Then she turned to my parents. Respond. And my father started in with excuses. We thought we were protecting her. We come from a generation where stability means, and Dr. Marsh cut him right off. What you're describing is classism. Did you ask Camille if she felt she was struggling? No. Did you ask Caleb about his life, his work, his plans? No. So you judged him with no information? Yes. My mother was crying. Dr. Marsh looked at her and asked, "What are the tears about? That you hurt her? Or that you look bad?" Direct hit. My mother couldn't answer. Then Dr. Marsh leaned forward and asked the question that cracked the whole thing open. Would you have called Camille if that video hadn't gone viral? Silence. Diane? I don't know. Gerald? Probably not as soon. And Dr. Marsh said, so your motivation to repair this isn't guilt over the hurt you caused. It's embarrassment over being exposed. And I let out this bitter little laugh, and I said, of course it is. They didn't care that I walked alone. They cared that 30 million people watched me walk alone. Dr. Marsh made my mother apologize, a real one, no, we thought, just accountability. It took her 3 tries. And then she made my father do it. And he said, I was wrong. I let my pride run the show and I lost my daughter's biggest day. And I looked at him and I asked, do you even know what day it was? The date? What I wore? Who was there? And he panicked, and he got the date right, but nothing else. And I said, because you weren't there. You don't get to retroactively care. She gave them homework. Letters. Real ones. And she put them on what I called probation, 6 months minimum. Show up when I ask. Leave when I ask. Earn back trust through actions, not words. While I was rebuilding things with my parents, Caleb was building something of his own. A few days after the wedding, he stared at his mother's phone number for a long time. Picked the phone up. Put it down. 3 times. He said, this is insane. A week ago I thought she was dead to me. Now I'm nervous to call my own mother. Finally he just texted, it's Caleb. Can we meet? The little typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. And then, yes. Anytime. Anywhere. They met at a Dunkin' halfway between Boston and Providence. Both got there early. Both ordered black coffee. Both barely touched it. And Loretta told him everything, all over again, but slower this time. And Caleb made her hear all of it, every detail of that day. Gate 6. The Snickers bar. The 41 minutes. The napkin. Wanda. The 3 hours he waited for Grandma Ruth. And he told her the rules. He said, I'm angry. I'm going to be angry for a long time, and you don't get to rush me through that. And you don't get to be Mom. Ruth was my mom. You're Loretta. And she nodded, tears streaming, and she said, okay. But at the end, she asked him one thing. She said, is there anything good you remember? From before? And he paused. And he thought about it. And he said, Saturday mornings. Sometimes you'd be clean for a week or 2. You'd make pancakes. Chocolate chip. We'd watch cartoons. You'd braid my hair. And he touched his short hair and smiled, just a little. I used to wear it longer. And she said, through her tears, I remember. I used to call you my little man. And he said, and then you'd disappear, and I'd eat cereal for a week. But those Saturday mornings, I held on to those. They kept meeting. Same Dunkin', every time. It became a ritual. Slowly, carefully, the rawness started to wear down into something else. One day she brought a photo album, Caleb as a baby, a toddler, before all the chaos. He stared at a picture of himself with chocolate cake all over his face and said, "I don't remember this." And she said, "I know. It's been a few months now. And life has settled into a new shape." My parents went to every therapy session. The letters got more honest. My father wrote that he was terrified of being associated with dysfunction because he grew up poor and fought so hard to escape it, and that he punished Caleb for something his mother did, not for who he actually is. Progress. Slow. Tentative. They're still on probation. They'll be on probation for a long while. But they're showing up, and for now, that counts for something. Caleb and Loretta keep meeting. He's invited her to a few of his therapy sessions. He still calls her Loretta. She doesn't push. And Frank, her husband, told Caleb something at one of those meetings that stuck with him. He said, "Your mom has talked about you every single day for years." It meant she never gave up. And Caleb said, "That must have been annoying." And Frank laughed and said, "No. It meant she never gave up." One evening we all walked along the water in Providence, the four of us, coffee in hand, talking about small things. And as the sun went down, Frank offered to take a photo. Caleb, me, and Loretta. And Caleb, who 23 years ago sat alone on a blue plastic chair at Gate 6, stood there between his wife and his mother, and let somebody take a picture of the three of them. Together. And I kept my wedding bouquet, by the way. I never tossed it. When it came time, I just held it up and told the whole room, "This bouquet walked down the aisle with me when no one else would. It's staying with me." And the whole room understood. My parents thought they knew exactly who they were rejecting. They were so sure. So certain that a man who'd been thrown away as a child wasn't good enough for their daughter. But here's what they never understood. The woman who actually broke Caleb, who left him at a bus station with a candy bar and a napkin, found a way to show up, sober, 23 years later, just to make sure he wouldn't stand alone again. And the perfect parents, the ones who'd never had a problem in their comfortable lives, stayed home and mailed back one word. No. The whole world saw the difference. And so did they. So let me ask you, wherever you're watching from right now, who in your family judged a person they never even bothered to know? Tell me about it down in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved something in you, if you've ever loved somebody your family was too small to see, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button and stick around. Because the people everybody writes off, they've got the best stories of all. And I've got plenty more. I'll see you in the next one.